parts of Northern Ireland. Underneath all that cloud, though, it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal gales, perhaps possible later on Saturday. This accompanied by outbreaks of rain for the vast majority of us. The far north of Scotland getting away with the sunniest and driest start to the weekend, but there'll be further outbreaks of rain and showers as we head into Sunday and the start of next week as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, Nigel Farage defeats woke Coutts as the NatWest CEO issues a sensational mea culpa for his politicised debanking. But with the BBC yet to apologise for misreporting the scandal, I'll ask why the MSM refuses to prove they'll defend free speech. That's in my digest next, and then my superstar panel weigh in tonight. I'm joined by Alison Pearson, Lord Sean Bailey and Amy Nicole Turner. Also coming up, we're just an hour away from the polls closing in 3 fascinating by-elections that could leave slippery star Michelle shocked, or perhaps more likely fishy-rishy, really. But what does the future of the crisis-hit Conservative Party look like? Former Education Secretary Dame Andrea Jenkyns gives her honest appraisal. That's up at the polls close. Elsewhere tonight, as it's revealed, Harry and Meghan unsuccessfully tried to hitch a ride on Joe Biden's Air Force One, while Jill Biden snubbed the Invictus Games out of loyalty to the royal family. Are the Sussexes less important than they like to believe? My royal masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier, offer exclusive insight on that. Plus, with a tour operator complaining that hundreds of copies of Harry's Snorefest book Spare are being binned in hotels by British holidaymakers, have Haz's efforts to win over the public now failed? Lady Victoria Harvey and Nina Mishkov go head-to-head on the sofa in the clash. And as endless strikes force a 94-year-old woman to drag her bin 2 miles to the tip, is Sunak right to say Labour is unwilling to stand up to their paymasters in the unions? Ann Widdecombe takes on slippery Starmer, big witty style shortly. We'll have tomorrow's front pages on the way too. And Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie is live to give his unflinching take on Farage, the Falklands fiasco and so much more. This is Dan Wootton Tonight. Let's go. You're watching GB News, Britain's news channel, My Digest, and what I think has become a watershed moment in terms of the protection of free speech against woke corporations here in Britain. Straight after the news with Rory Smith.
Thank you, Dan. The group CEO of NatWest, which includes Coutts, has apologised to Nigel Farage after his account was closed. Dame Alison Rose apologises for what she calls deeply inappropriate comments made about Mr Farage in the now published papers. She continued, saying it is not in the company's policy to drop a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views. A full review of Coutts' processes and how these decisions are made will be carried out. Speaking on a show here on GB News, Nigel says questions remain for NatWest.
There's a reiteration of the offer to give me NatWest services. This offer was made verbally to me just before I went on air on GB News a couple of weeks ago. I also wonder, if I go to NatWest, how long will it be before they close me down? Because there's no guarantee that they'll keep me as a customer, and that does genuinely concern me.
The illegal migration bill has now become law. It will prevent people from claiming asylum in the UK if they arrive through unauthorised means. The government also hopes the changes will ensure detained people are removed either to their home country or to a third country. The Home Secretary says the focus is now on appealing to the Supreme Court to make Rwanda one of the countries people can be sent to. Strikes by health workers could end up costing hospitals billions of pounds. That's according to Matthew Taylor, the head of the body that represents NHS organisations. He says they're on red alert for the next 48 hours as senior doctors walk out over pay. He also says health leaders are deeply concerned by the impact that strikes are having. The government says it has listened to the BMA's demands. Rail passengers face disruption today in the first of 3 days of strike action this month. Up to 20,000 rail staff are on strike over job security and pay, which caused disruption and cancellations across many services. 14 train companies in England were affected. Members are also walking out on the 22nd and 29th of July. There is just under 1 hour left for local people to vote in the 3 by-elections taking place in England today. All 3 seats in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Selby and Ainsty and Somerton and Frome have been held by the Conservatives since the last general election in 2019. Polling stations close at 10 o'clock. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Dan.
The opening page of the Coutts website reads, Coutts clients are trailblazers and pioneers, the disruptors and challengers who help to shape the fabric of UK society. And isn't that just the perfect description of one Nigel Farage, whose debanking scandal took an extraordinary twist today with a stunning mea culpa from NatWest CEO Dame Alison Rose, who wrote in a letter to the GB News host that the comments expressed in the bombshell 40-page dossier do not reflect the view of the bank. So she said, "I'm writing to apologise for the deeply inappropriate comments about yourself made in the now published papers prepared for the Wealth Committee. I believe very strongly that freedom of expression and access to banking are fundamental to our society, and it is absolutely not our policy to exit a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views." I would actually argue that apology isn't good enough. Surely Rose must immediately offer to reinstate Nigel's accounts long term. And it's been a day of grovelling apologies from the woke left, with another display of rare contrition from ex-BBC journalist turned self-righteous podcast host John Sopel. The Beeb's former North America editor initially sent a smug tweet claiming Nigel must have felt, quote, like a bit of a Charlie after his old employers did Coutts' dirty work by attempting to pour cold water on Nigel's insistence he was debanked for political reasons. But today, with his tail firmly between his legs, Sopel branded the unsavoury ordeal reprehensible and apologised, saying, "I got it wrong. Sorry, that will teach me to trust reporting of my old employer." Well, I could have told you that a long time ago, John. Nigel graciously accepted that apology, but Sopel actually raises an important question. Why did the nation-state broadcaster protect the interests of a bank over its customers? Was it because the British Bashing Corporation shares the bank's communist-style mission to eradicate wrongthink and promote its own woke worldview? Last night, the Daily Telegraph revealed that the NatWest CEO wined and dined next to the BBC's business editor Simon Jack at a glitzy-do in the Grand Ballroom of London's Langham Hotel the night before he published the bank's counterclaims about Nigel's wealth being insufficient. So frankly, the whole thing stinks. This kind of client journalism to protect the interests of London's metropolitan elite, not ordinary Brits, it damages our democracy and proves why no one trusts the British Bashing Corporation anymore. And now Rose's position, said to be untenable, with what she did to Nigel causing huge reputational damage as well as appearing to breach client confidentiality. And one source has told our very own Alison Pearson tonight, someone has to go. The Treasury today toughened rules for banks over account closures and will have to give a reason for shutting someone's bank account, a move designed to protect freedom of expression. But the mainstream media and the liberal elites within it must do more to prove to the British public that they too are on the side of free speech. But to respond now, the aforementioned top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, the Conservative pair, and we're going to be talking more about that because it's been a big week for Lord Sean Bailey. We'll do so later. And the author and broadcaster, newly married as well. Congratulations, new name, Amy Nicole Turner.
I've extended things.
Just to make my life a little bit more difficult. So, Alison Pearson, you've got a lot of exclusive information tonight. What are you hearing about this Coutts versus Farage drama?
I've been talking to people who are very, very senior at Coutts at the highest level. They're talking about a woke bullying culture within Coutts where progressive ideas are forced onto staff, and if the staff protest, then they are sacked or cancelled. So that's the background to this. And when this woman, Alison Rose, first took on her $5.4 million job, her first thing was to say that her major priority was climate change, Dan, because as we know, banks are all about climate change, aren't they? So it's an extraordinary picture, and I think there's so many different elements of it which we'll all unpick. But for them to say, for her, Alison Rose, to claim in her apology, quotes unquote, to Nigel, that the 40-page dossier in which he was called a disingenuous grifter, he was called racist, he was called xenophobic, and the thing I love best was he was accused of Thatcherite values. If we were to subtract, Dan, from the client base of Coutts all the people who made money during the Thatcher era, they'd be left with about 10 people.
But it's quite funny, though, isn't it? Because they wanted to make this decision in theory to make their reputation better, but it's done the reverse and it's completely destroyed their reputation.
But it's not, Amy, the clients of Coutts, the idea that this woman, Alison Rose, claims their policy is inclusivity. This is a bank for people with extreme high...
Well, that's
it's the least inclusive bank in the world.
It is exclusivity. That is their raison d'etre. Let me tell you, the people I'm talking to are saying it's disgusting, it's disgraceful. All the clients, many of whom are landowners, many of whom are families who've banked with Coutts for centuries, are going to be fleeing because a lot of money doesn't like publicity, Dan. You know, it's going to cost. So this woman has basically put off existing clients, put off forthcoming clients, and has, you know, brought the bank into grave disrepute. She must either go or be sacked.
The real risk she took is a very poor banker that gives personal information. If you're one of the very well-to-do people at Coutts, what you want above all things is anonymity. You want to be invisible.
Yes.
And the idea that your banker will slip a note or a tongue to a BBC journalist is terror for you.
But the thing is, why do these really rich people need this special banking? Am I really naive to just ask that simple question?
Yes, you are.
Well, tell me why then.
Because all banks
why can't they get down the NatWest?
All NatWest would have some very, very rich customers as well.
All banks have high net worth individuals which are given a special service, Amy.
I've been debanked by Coutts by that logic. I can't bank with Coutts.
You wouldn't have been banked in the first place.
Well, exactly. So I just can't understand.
If they find out how woke you are, Alison Rose will give you a special.
And maybe if I get a bit of a pay rise.
Sean raises the point of the BBC, Alison, and this is actually really shocking, isn't it? Because Simon Jack, who did the bidding of Coutts and tried to make Nigel look foolish and suggested that he'd lost his account simply because he didn't have whatever was required in it, at this event, next to Rose, the day before he reported the news. So, of course, we can't say for certain that she was his source, but come on, it's looking suspicious, isn't it? It's looking suspect.
Yeah, as you said, Dan, in your intro, it does stink to high heaven, and it does create this picture of a certain elite class of person with the same set of views, supporting each other, feeding each other information. The reason they wanted to get rid of Nigel was basically, doesn't smell right at our dinner parties. It's snobbery. It's bias. It's absolutely disgusting. And NatWest is owned, 39% of NatWest is owned by the taxpayer, who had to bail that useless bank out, run into the ground by Fred the Shred Goodwin. We spent billions of public money on this bank, and now the Coutts despises many of the people who voted for Brexit.
I just feel like this has gone a little bit far, and there is only limited sympathy I can have for a very, very, very rich man's banking arrangements. And this has hit so many headlines.
But you don't understand it's bigger than that.
Tell me, enlighten me.
I'll tell you why it's bigger than that. Because it looks like a certain set of people collude to cancel
one private bank.
Yeah, to cancel people, and it wasn't one private bank. It's the way the story went around. It's the way it's supported, and what it does, it shines a light on the activities that are going on. The idea that you can destroy someone's life and family just because they don't share your.
And also the point is, and it happened to lots of people before, Amy, including me with HSBC. We were all too ashamed to do anything about it, to speak out publicly about it, because we worried it would make us less likely for other financial institutions to take us on. So Nigel, who battled this personally for many months, actually speaking out, he's done us all such a huge favour. And can you not see, Amy, that there is this slow creep towards a Chinese-style social credit system in this country?
Not really, because they offered him a different account.
Yeah, but
so they offered him a slightly altered...
Number one,
he wasn't
him that account. We just have to get the facts right. They only offered him that account once they found out that Nigel was about to go on GB News and blow the whistle on the whole thing.
There you go.
These values, I was talking to one of the most senior people in British banking today. These values, there is a woodworm of woke in the foundations of all of our institutions now, and it is going to take a hell of a person to come in and to take it out. It is destroying our democracy.
But that's why the government's response was important. The government has acted swiftly, but it needs to go wider. I was in the Chamber and House of Lords, and many a lord of all political stripes had horrific stories to tell of people being cancelled. And why this is important? Because it destroys lives, it destroys institutions, and eventually it'll start to destroy parts of our economy. You must be able to express yourself freely in this country. It's what built this country. It's what built the Western world. And if we remove that, we remove all of our freedoms.
And you must be able to hire talented people regardless of race, ethnicity, religion.
Speaking of talented people, big week for our Sean Bailey. Now, Lord Sean Bailey. Let's have a look at what went on.
We're going to get him cropped up like Santa Claus.
Lord Bailey of Paddington, do swear by Almighty God
that I will be faithful and bear true the allegiances to His Majesty the King Charles, his heirs, his successors, according to law, so help me God.
Lord Sean Bailey of Paddington. Is it the Paddington where our studio is based?
It's the Paddington where our studio is based. I was born in the old Paddington Hospital. So
Love it.
Paddington, because it's, you know, part of my London story.
Yeah, and a GB News connection, though, too.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
How was it, Sean?
It hasn't really sunk in. It's a bit surreal. It's an opportunity to do more to serve the country, to pick up the issues I like, and people are writing to me and speaking to me about what they want me to pursue. And on one level, it's mind-blowing. On another level, it's a new job. But on every level, it's just an opportunity to support the country in any way I can.
Well, congratulations. We're very honoured to have you on our panel still.
You.
Lord Sean Bailey of Paddington, alongside, Amy, you've got to remind me.
Michael Turner.
It's new.
It's feminist.
New. I'm getting used to it.
We just put them both in.
And Alison Pearson too. But still to come, as continued strikes force a 94-year-old woman to drag her bin 2 miles to the recycling centre to dump her waste. Is Rishi Sunak right that Labour is unwilling to stand up to the union paymasters? Former Tory Minister Ann Widdecombe weighs in on that disgraceful story really soon. But next, in the clash, a frustrated holiday firm complains that hundreds of copies of Prince Harry's book are being left behind in European hotels by British holidaymakers. So have his efforts to win over the public now failed? Journalist, broadcaster, Sussex squad member Nina Mishkov goes head-to-head with the socialite Lady Victoria Harvey. Oh, it's always feisty, this. Dan at GBNews.com if you want to weigh in. Vote in our poll at GB News on Twitter. We're back in just a couple of minutes' time.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Dan Wootton. You can watch me live on GB News Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. And did you know that you can also watch and listen live on our website, gbnews.com. You'll always be up to date on the latest breaking news, as well as enjoying the best stories, opinions and shows. You can even join the debate under our live player as you're watching. So head straight to gbnews.com on TV, radio and online. GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nah, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the people's channel and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Ann Widdecombe and Lady Colin Campbell both on the way this hour, but first the clash. And if proof were needed that Prince Harry's Woe Is Me Act has bored the world to death, look no further than the hotel rooms and sunbeds of foreign holiday resorts. So this is hilarious. Tour operator on the beach has revealed that more than 100 copies of his tell-all memoir, Spare, have been left abandoned at hotels across Spain, Turkey and Greece, leaving the firm struggling to give them away. Company boss Zoe Harris said her team had, quote, never witnessed anything quite like it, and it follows a rough few months for the Sussexes, not least after being dumped from their £20 million Spotify deal, called effing grifters by a top exec, and reports yesterday they are sailing towards financial turmoil and living in hell in Montecito. So what do you think? Does this prove Prince Harry's efforts to win over the public have failed? Dan at gbnews.com. Vote in our poll at gbnews on Twitter. The results shortly. But doing battle on this now, broadcaster, supporter of Harry and Meghan, Nina Mishkov, and the socialite and royal expert, Lady Victoria Harvey. So, Lady V, what does this suggest? That people are like, oh, God, I'm going to have to give this a go, but they have no interest in actually taking the book with them? Because apparently it's dumped more than any other book in the world. So.
Right. Yeah, I mean, look, it had a lot of sales, but it's the highest dumped book as well. I think, you know, people were just sick of hearing about him complaining and whining and just being so spoiled. But also, look, they might have read it and then they might have, like, got halfway through and just decided they're dumping it because they just don't want to carry it back, right? So wherever they live, they've just left it for the next person.
Nina, this was quite telling, wasn't it?
No, absolutely not. You're misinterpreting this. I mean, if you're lying around a pool and you see all these other copies being read, you know you're reading the book of the summer.
You've got yours right there.
I've got mine. Oh, you've got it with you.
So you never dumped it?
No, of course. Why? Well, I didn't read it on holiday. I don't take hardbacks on holiday. And the reason for that in Victoria, because you probably go in private jets, but if you go on EasyJet, if you go on EasyJet or Ryanair or any or TUI or any of the ones you go to, your hand luggage
this is heavy.
Is 10 kilos.
Yeah.
This is over £1.5 pound. Right. You're not going to take a hardback. So if you do make the effort, you buy it at the airport so that it's not part of your luggage. You take it.
And so you think it's a planned thing. Okay, but look, there's a broader point here, Lady V, which is that things just don't seem to be working out.
Look, I think their luck is just running out at this point, and people are just seeing through him and them as a couple, and they don't want to be part of it anymore.
The thing is,
don't you think?
You're talking about, you want to broaden out, but we are talking about the book. The book is currently at number 8 in the New York Times bestseller list. It's been there for 27 weeks. If you go on the Amazon website, bestsellers of the year.
Or maybe
number 1 is Spare. If you look,
but maybe they're just like realising they just don't need to buy more copies because copies are everywhere, right?
When people go on holiday, they buy a book at the airport.
But if it's
this isn't about the book.
But if it's a book that you really love, like when I get a book and I really love it, even if it's a big book and I'm on holiday, if I really love that book, I will fly back.
I will take back. But lots of people.
So they just basically abandon them, right?
But Lady V, isn't there a bigger point here, which is that there seems to be a waning influence? The New York Post's page 6, which is very tapped in, actually, to Harry and Meghan, reporting that actually their life is a living hell in Montecito because they're so concerned about how they can pay.
Look, I've been to Montecito a couple of times, and it is boring. There's nothing to do. There's that one main road. I don't know if you've both been. There's this one road with a few restaurants on.
And it's delightful.
There's a road with a few restaurants on, and then that road literally goes onto a highway. Like, there's nothing there.
Yes, but you could say there's nothing there at Sandringham.
No, but it's not pretty. Like people imagine that it's pretty. It's not pretty.
No, never. Santa Barbara is beautiful. I love Santa Barbara. And
but isn't the issue that I've lost all of these big contracts and now they're struggling to see how they can maintain
they've lost
this
Spotify,
lifestyle.
but then so did the Obamas, and the Obamas are hardly struggling, are they? No, they are living a happy life.
Well, the one place that they were hanging out in LA, they actually, like I heard from people in LA, that they actually got barred.
What happened?
Well, the private members club where they organised to have paparazzi outside in West Hollywood, they're not allowed to go back.
Really? Well, so sorry, a private members club banned Harry and Meghan because they secretly asked for paparazzi?
Yeah, because
they secretly asked? Are you sure?
It's the one that they
That's tittle
go to. No. I know people in LA. Like, I've lived there for a long time. It's
Are
not.
you
It's
doubting
true.
Lady V's sources?
Yes, I do.
OK, well, let's try and
look, this
find
is
out.
a very tenuous story. It's a private members club.
No, they don't like... The other people there do not like paparazzi, right? So they brought paparazzi with them. They would do set-up shots.
The fact that they would bring paparazzi, they load the paparazzi.
They do set-up shots all the time.
But Nina, lots of people have been saying that Meghan has set up a lot of
What
shots.
about that fake story? What about the fake story with the driving in the car? That was made up.
Not a fake story. That was not a fake story.
Fantasy car chase.
The fantasy car chase. You think that was real?
Where it's impossible to get above, 10 miles per hour.
In certain places, you can. In Riverside, you can get up speed.
You're very loyal. So no way, Nina.
Loyal defender over here.
No, absolutely not. The thing is, how much influence do they want? I think they are leading a happy
San
life.
Vicente Bungalows. Sorry, I've just remembered the name.
Everything is quieting
What's the
down.
name?
San Vicente Bungalows. So you should try and reach out to them and say, is this a true?
OK, little scoop there from Lady Victoria Harvey. Thank you too to Nina Mishkov. Who do you agree with? Have Prince Harry's efforts to win over the public failed? From Flo this is via Twitter. To be fair, holidaymakers nearly always leave their unfinished books at the resort. Usually there's a shelf or cupboard somewhere you can leave your book and choose another suit. So that's very much the point that Nina was making. From Gaz, great if you get caught short with no toilet roll. How very thoughtful. Oh, Gaz, that's mean. And from Sockville, at last, we finally know the reason behind the title Spare, given the thousands of surplus copies currently lingering around. Your verdict's now in. 87% of you agree that Harry's efforts to win over the public have failed. Just 13% of you say they have not. Now, coming up, Fleet Street legend Kelvin McKenzie unleashes on the Woketopians who have been forced to apologise to Nigel Farage over his banking scandal. He's uncancelled later in the show. First, though, the weather.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A lucky few of us have managed to see some sunny spells throughout today, but there are still a few showers lingering on into the evening and into Friday as well, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland through Scotland as well. Also a few just clearing their way off the far southeast of England as well. In between that, we will start to see some clearer spells developing, and that will allow those temperatures to just slide off into single figures for particularly rural areas, particularly for parts of central Scotland. We could see close to 4 degrees Celsius, so a bit of a chill in the air first thing on Friday morning. That will allow for some sunshine, but there's also going to be the central area from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland down into Northern England, where it is rather cloudy from the word go, and that cloud will continue to push its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day. The risk of some scattered showers in there as well. More prolonged rain for parts of Northern Ireland. Underneath all that cloud, though, it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal gales, perhaps possible later on Saturday. This accompanied by outbreaks of rain for the vast majority of us, the far north of Scotland getting away with the sunniest and driest start to the weekend. But there'll be further outbreaks of rain and showers as we head into Sunday and the start of next week as well. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Coming up, Royal Masterminds Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier give their expert analysis on embarrassing revelations that Harry and Meghan were denied a ride back to America on Joe Biden's Air Force One after the late Queen's funeral. But first, militant unions are running riot. But is Rishi Sunak right that Labour hasn't got the bottle to stand up to their paymasters? Former Tory Minister Ann Widdecombe reacts to a disgraceful story that one pensioner had to drag her bin 2 miles down the road after refuse workers downed tools. She's also going to react to Nigel Farage's victory over woke Coutts. Ann Widdecombe live next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle.
I know, yeah.
Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant, the big my superstar panel, they're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes and Kerr, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views. And often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard. We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
My Royal Masterminds Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier up very shortly, but first, big witty style with former Tory Minister Ann Widdecombe. And as I mentioned at the top of the show, GB News star Nigel Farage has rocked the establishment this week by exposing the illustrious British bank Coutts, who ruthlessly closed his account after claiming issues with commercial viability. The bank has now been forced into an embarrassing U-turn after Nigel exposed the real reasons for its closure, his perhaps controversial but entirely legitimate political opinions, as well as his friendships with public figures, including Donald Trump and Novak Djokovic, with Coutts, remember, saying he did not align with their values. So, Ann Widdecombe, this is a massive victory, not just for Farage over Coutts, but actually for free speech champions over the establishment.
Yes, that is true, but I'm rather disappointed by the government's response. Now, they acted quickly as far as banks go, say they'll change the law, etc. Now, they've already imposed a free speech law on universities. Now they're going to do it effectively on the banks. But why do it piecemeal? The fact is, throughout this country, you can be cancelled just for having the wrong views. And there should be an overarching law which makes a presumption in favour of free speech, and it should cover not just banks and not just universities. It should cover businesses, great and small, with their employees and their customer accounts. It should cover theatres, it should cover cinemas, it should cover local councils, absolutely anything, anywhere, it should cover. Doing it piecemeal won't meet the case, Rishi.
That's a good point, actually. But, Anne, so many aspects of this story completely stink. Like the fact the BBC was doing the bidding of Coutts after the chief executive, Rose, had been at this awards do, this establishment awards do, probably quaffing champagne with Simon Jack, the BBC business editor. He reported something as fact, clearly based on a source at Coutts. Now that's been exposed as a complete lie. Should the BBC be apologising here for false reporting? Maybe we need to get that BBC Verify unit onto this claim.
Yeah, the BBC, of course, it should apologise, but I think the crucial thing here is that if they did have a source at the bank, and we all think we know who it was, but if they did have a source at the bank, that is such a breach of client confidentiality that that person should be obliged to resign. And my question is, why hasn't that person already resigned? I mean, the poor old BBC, have a heart. They must have thought they'd got the scoop of the century when, this story was given to them, that poor old Nigel, he didn't have enough money in his account. They really must have thought it's this wonderful thing. They should have learnt from the past. They should have learnt from the Cliff Richard fiasco. They should know that actually it's probably better to get things checked out. And if you're going to mess around with people, don't mess around with Farage. And he's the last person they should have been messing around with.
Very good point. Now, Rishi Sunak has lashed out at the Labour Party, and as ongoing industrial action continues to cripple the country. So he's written for the Daily Telegraph and said the opposition have shown total unwillingness to stand up to the unions, even with those demanding unaffordable rises of 35%. Sir Keir Starmer has failed to rule out meeting their request. The impact of the strikes by these unions cannot be underestimated. A 94-year-old great-grandmother from Canterbury was forced to drag her wheelie bin 2 miles to the nearest tip after waiting 3 weeks for striking refuse workers to correct it. So, Anne, that's the human cost of these strikes. Is Sunak right to say that Labour is unwilling to do anything about this, given the unions effectively still run the Labour Party?
I mean, yes, for once in his life, Rishi's actually talking common sense, which doesn't happen every time that he pronounces, but I think he's absolutely right. And by the way, just as an aside, I hope that poor old lady is going to get a rebate from her council tax, because she certainly deserves it. She's paid for a service she's not receiving. But it also, that story, brings home the message that people always suffer when there's a strike on. People who can't get hospital treatment, people who can't get a flight to see family, not just for a holiday, maybe dying family, maybe sick family. There's always somebody somewhere who suffers. And with this bin strike, you had an old lady who has an immense amount of energy. I hope I can do that at 94, I really do. But this was somebody who was suffering. Now, it's true what Rishi says. Labour has done nothing about saying what it would do with the unions. Is it going to give in to all their demands? Is it going to resist them? What is it going to do? We don't hear. All we know is they certainly don't challenge the unions, who are, of course, largely their paymasters. So I think that what you can say here is that Keir Starmer has failed, and Rishi Sunak is now pointing out the blooming obvious. But now they should press that. It's no good Rishi just say it and then move on to another topic. They should press and press and press that in Parliament, in the media, everywhere they can. People should be pointing out that Keir Starmer has basically stuck his head in the sand and is taking no position at all on public suffering.
Now, and Prince George, this is really interesting. Apparently, he is not going to be expected to serve in the armed forces before he becomes king, which will, of course, break a centuries-old precedent within the British monarchy. I hear you're not a big fan of this move, Anne.
I think it's insane. I mean, I think if that really is what William's decided, and we've only had one report, but if that really is what William's decided, he's just lost the plot. I mean, there's a very good reason why heirs to the throne serve in the armed services. It's not because there's some fluffy tradition. It is because the armed services take their oath of allegiance to the monarch, and it is the monarch who signs off the order for war. And therefore, when they take that oath of loyalty to the monarch, they need to be able to feel that he or she is one of them. And they can't feel that if that monarch's never, ever been in the armed services. It doesn't have to be a very lengthy time.
But Anne, what if William and Kate know young George and know that this would be like a Prince Edward moment? Do you remember when Prince Edward was forced to enter, and it was a disaster, Anne? He wasn't made for that. It didn't suit the type of guy that he was.
Didn't matter in Prince Edward's case because he was umpteen in line by that time and always knew that he would slip further down as his older siblings had their own children. So it really didn't matter in Edward's case, and I was not one of those who condemned Edward at the time, actually. I said, look, I think he was fourth in line then, just let him go his own way. But this is different. This is the person to whom the armed services will pledge allegiance. And if he can't be bothered to serve, or is too scared to serve, or doesn't really think it will be terribly congenial to serve, that is not going to work. I don't know what William is thinking of if he has actually said that. I can only hope the king bashes some sense into their heads.
Oh, my goodness. And you're just like, George, like it or not, you're going in the Navy.
Yes. Or, if he decides that he doesn't want royal life, if that's what he decides, I respect that, but then he gives up his birthright.
Wow. Tough talking, Ann Widdecombe. Big Woody style. Great to speak to you, Ann. I'll speak next week. But coming up in the Media Buzz, my superstar panel give their first reactions to the 3 by-elections taking place across England today that could set the tone for the general election. You've got to get voting, although keep watching us, please, because polls close very shortly. Of course, the big question is whether this is the beginning of the end for Rishi Sunak. We'll analyse up to 10. But next, my Royal Masterminds Lady C and Phil D reacted to the sensational news that Harry and Meghan were snubbed a ride back to America on President Joe Biden's Air Force One jet after the late Queen's funeral. So are the runaway royals deluded, and are Meghan's political ambitions now in tatters? My Royal Masterminds react straight after this.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here. Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Time now for our Royal Masterminds, Lady Colin Campbell and Phil Dampier. And it's been revealed Harry and Meghan got a harsh reality check at the late Queen's funeral after they were sensationally snubbed a ride back to the US on Air Force One. The White House rejected their attempt to fly home on Joe Biden's presidential plane, insisting the move would cause a diplomatic row with King Charles. Months earlier, First Lady Jill Biden was also invited to the Dukes and Victors Games, but the idea was quashed over concerns the royal family would be offended by her presence there. So, Lady Colin Campbell, let me bring you in on this. What do you make of it?
Well, Dan, it confirms what I've been saying for the last 2 years. You know, it's been no secret in certain circles that despite Meghan's attempts to cultivate the Democratic Party, or like all A-listers, everybody is treating her like the pariah that she is. Nobody wants to know. And Harry, same thing. You know, people have had a choice to make, and they have made it. Whether it's the Amal and George Clooney's or the Jill and Joe Bidens, and the list is fairly endless. They've had a choice. Either they are with Harry and Meghan, or they leave their options open to have good relations with the royal family. But they can't do both. And what's really interesting is how this has got out. Because this has not got out by accident. This has got out purposely.
Phil Dampier, what's your take on this one?
Yeah, good evening, Dan. I mean, getting on Air Force One was a non-starter, wasn't it? I mean, it's not a taxi service, isn't it? I mean, it would have set a precedent, and you can't have any Tom, Dick or Harry getting on Air Force One. See what I did there? You know, that was never going to happen. But they're definitely on the way out, as Lady C says. We don't see them with the Obamas anymore. We don't see them with Oprah anymore. And I think although Joe Biden's quite happy to pull strings in the background concerning Harry's visa, he is actually quite close to King Charles, as we saw the other day when he was at Windsor Castle with him. They get on very well. They see eye to eye on things like climate change. And if he's going to serve a second term, he wants to have better relations with him. So although I know Tom Bowyer thinks that Meghan might want to stand as president one day, I just don't see it happening now. I don't think she's got the clout to do it. I don't think she's got the backing. I don't think she's got the temperament for it. And I think she ought to forget all about a political career and really concentrate on something commercial, like, you know, the health and beauty lifestyle, reinvent the tick, something like that, and just forget it, because I just don't think she's cut out for it.
Now, look, in a damn mean column for the Daily Mail today, Richard Kay says Harry and Meghan's treatment of her estranged father, Thomas Markle, who celebrated 5 birthdays since speaking to his daughter this week, is the cruelest thing they've ever done. Now, Lady C, you're very close to the Markle family. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. I agree with everything Richard Kelly said. And I said it in my book, Meghan and Harry, The Real Story, that the biggest mistake Meghan would be proven to have made was that she had dumped her father the way she did. You know, everybody in every culture, everywhere in the world understands a variation of the commandment, honour thy mother and thy father, that thy days on this earth may be long. You know, it doesn't matter. Every family has its issues. People don't like certain people in the family. Nobody trashes their family. It is just not done. And to humiliate not only her father, but the rest of her family the way she did, people picked up on the fact that it was unforgivable, and they have not forgiven her. It gave a clear insight into Meghan's lack of character, lack of feeling, lack of loyalty. And I could go on endlessly about the messages it gives lack of. But the fact of the matter is the public have picked up on it, and they picked up on it very early on. You know, the only people who didn't pick up on it were the idiots who follow her and think that she's leading them to the Holy Grail, when in fact she's leading them to something pretty unholy.
Bill Dampier, your take?
Yeah, well, Lady C knows the Markles much better than I do, Dan. But I mean, he really has been the biggest loser out of all of this since the whole saga started, hasn't he? I mean, he missed the wedding. He's lost his daughter. He's never met the grandchildren. I mean, the whole thing is absolutely tragic. And the fact that even now, Harry and Meghan refer to the fact that as if he's just some sort of complete stranger and cannot be bothered to go down and see him when he's literally just down the road across the border in Mexico. I mean, it's absolutely tragic, and it really indicates what they are like as people, that they, and I mean, God forbid, I don't know what they're going to feel like if something happens to him, because we know he's not in the best of health, but it really is a very, very sad story, and I think Richard Kay's right. He has been the biggest victim in all this.
Now, Lady C, the King's sovereign grant has been slashed in half by the Treasury. Is it right for the monarch to foot the bill for public services?
Well, Dan, I've looked into it quite carefully, and, you know, there are fewer royals actually working at the moment, and they're doing fewer assignments, engagements. And William and his family are now out of the sovereign grant. William has the Duchy of Cornwall. So Charles has actually done a very clever thing, if you stop to think about it. He has given his critics a poisoned chalice, because he has voluntarily cut down the cost of the monarchy. And I think that this is sustainable for a few years. But when the younger ones have to get involved, because, I mean, the average age of the working royals is about 70, and when the younger ones get involved, they're going to have to increase the sovereign grant again, which I'm sure they will do without a problem. I think the monarchy costs each person in this country £1.29 per annum.
Phil Dampier?
Yeah, I think Lady C's absolutely right. The fact that this initiative, if you like, is coming from the King himself, I think speaks volumes. I mean, he knows that they've done extremely well out of the system over the last decade or so. It was actually devised by George Osborne. And they've raked it in, really, because they've had things like wind farms, and they own the whole of the coast around the UK, and the properties in London. So they've made a lot of money. And I think he realises that they really have done well financially. So he's giving something back. We saw last week that Camilla's not going to be given a salary like Prince Philip was from the state. That's going to be private. We saw Prince William renting out the cottage that Charles used to stay in Wales. So it's all moving in the right direction, and I think they're doing the right thing, and I think the public will respect them for it. So it's coming from them, and that's why it counts.
Well, Lady C, I would like some of the money to be spent on saving the next Commonwealth Games, because, you know, this hard left premier in Australia has just got rid of them and Melbourne altogether. And I think actually the Commonwealth Games are so important. Why not have them back in the UK? Isn't that a good use of Charles's, well, and William's now money?
I think it's a brilliant idea, Dan. I think it's a brilliant idea. When you stop to think of all of the athletes who have been training for years for this moment, and to have it pulled by that creep in, I think it's Victoria.
Yes, Victoria. Dan Andrews, the Republican Dan Andrews of Victoria.
Yes, and he's done it without explanation, and there's no real reason for doing it. And he's done it because he's trying to further the Republican agenda. But I mean, it's not fair to the athletes all over the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is the biggest bloc of nations in the world. We're speaking about billions of people, if not hundreds of millions of people. And they all have athletes who have been training for years. How dare he deprive them of their opportunity?
I totally agree. Lady C, Phil D, like that. My royal masterminds, thank you both so much. But coming up, polls for today's 3 crucial by-elections close in just a few minutes' time, and Tories bracing themselves for a bloodbath. I'm joined shortly by True Blue Dame Andrea Jenkyns MP, who'll give her first live reaction to where the Tories and this government go from here. My superstar panel, Alison Pearson, Lord Sean Bailey and Amy Nicole-Turner weigh in on the by-election bloodbath. First, though, will Labour be taking victory laps of Islington tonight, or does Sunak have one more trick up his sleeve to salvage the last days with the crumbling Conservative empire? We're back in just 2 minutes' time. Plus, by the way, first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages, hot off the press. Don't go anywhere.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A lucky few of us have managed to see some sunny spells throughout today, but there are still a few showers lingering on into the evening and into Friday as well, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland, through Scotland as well. Also a few just clearing their way off the far southeast of England as well. In between that, we will start to see some clearer spells developing, and that will allow those temperatures to just slide off into single figures for particularly rural areas, particularly for parts of central Scotland. We could see close to 4 degrees Celsius, so a bit of a chill in the air first thing on Friday morning. That will allow for some sunshine, but there's also going to be the central area from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland down into Northern England, where it is rather cloudy from the word go, and that cloud will continue to push its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day. The risk of some scattered showers in there as well. More prolonged rain for parts of Northern Ireland. Underneath all that cloud, though, it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal gales, perhaps possible later on Saturday. This accompanied by outbreaks of rain for the vast majority of us. The far north of Scotland getting away with the sunniest and driest start to the weekend, but there'll be further outbreaks of rain and showers as we head into Sunday and the start of next week as well. Bye-bye.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m. Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it. Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage. Here on GB News, we will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, D-Day for the Tories as polls close in 3 crucial by-elections just seconds ago. Rishi Sunak is braced for crushing results in Selby and Ainsty in North Yorkshire, Somerset and Frome in Somerset and Uxbridge and South Ruislip in West London. So, is tonight's feared bloodbath the beginning of the end for the Sunak government? And where did it all go wrong? My superstar panel weigh in next, and tonight I'm joined by Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey and Amy Nicole-Turner. Also tonight, one of the few remaining Conservatives in the Conservative Party, Dame Andrea Jenkyns, gives her live reaction to the by-election battles, her exclusive insight into what this means for the general election shortly, and apologies all round and Nigel Farage's bank account scandal. Former BBC hack John Sopel says sorry for his misinformed comments on the GB News star, while a stunning mea culpa from the chief executive of NatWest dropped just a few hours ago. So Fleet Street legend Kelvin McKenzie uncancelled on that latest bombshell development. He calls it one of the greatest victories over the establishment in a very long time. Meanwhile, England legend Ian Botham slams a racism in cricket report as a complete and utter waste of money and says people's lives have been destroyed by race accusations without evidence. So, is society's obsession with skin colour actually doing more harm than good? Plus, the war of Westminster rages on.
You sponge off society. Anyway, what's this about your second job with GB News? I won't take a second job. Here you go, I'll take a first job. 100,000.
What a line. I'll bring you the latest. Scrimmage between Tory Party Deputy Chair Lee Anderson and Remain a nuisance Steve Bray and our media buzz. Find out which woke newspaper has been nominated for tonight's Greatest Britain and Union Jackass for their, quote, ageist and sexist reporting. And we'll have the first of tomorrow's newspaper front pages for you straight after the news with Rory Smith.
Thank you, Dan. Good evening. The group CEO of NatWest, which includes Coutts, has apologised to Nigel Farage after his account was closed. Dame Alison Rose apologises for what she calls deeply inappropriate comments made about Mr Farage in the now published papers. She continued saying it is not in the company's policy to drop a customer on the basis of legally held political and personal views. A full review of Coutts' processes on how these decisions are made will be carried out. Speaking on a show here on GB News this evening, Nigel Farage says questions remain for NatWest.
A reiteration of the offer to give me NatWest services. This offer was made verbally to me just before I went on air on GB News a couple of weeks ago. I also wonder if I go to NatWest, how long will it be before they close me down? Because there's no guarantee that they'll keep me as a customer, and that does genuinely concern me.
The illegal migration bill has now become law. It will prevent people from claiming asylum in the UK if they arrive through unauthorised means. The government also hopes the changes will ensure detained people are removed either to their home country or to a third country. The Home Secretary says the focus is now on appealing to the Supreme Court to make Rwanda one of the countries people can be sent to. Polls have now closed in today's 3 by-elections in England. All 3 seats in Uxbridge and South Ruislip, Selby and Ainslie and Summerson and Frome have been held by the Conservatives since the last general election in 2019. The Prime Minister's press secretary has previously acknowledged it would be tough for the party to hold all 3 seats. Strikes by health workers could end up costing hospitals billions of pounds. That's according to Matthew Taylor, the head of the body that represents NHS organisations. He says they're on red alert for the next 48 hours as senior doctors walk out over pay. He says health leaders are deeply concerned by the impact that strikes are having. The government says it has listened to the BMA's demands. Rail passengers face disruption today in the first of 3 days of strike action this month. Up to 20,000 rail staff are on strike over job security and pay, which caused disruption and cancellations across many services. 14 train companies in England were affected. Members are also walking out on the 22nd and 29th of July. TV, online, DAB+ radio and on TuneIn. This is GB News. Now though, back to Dan.
Tomorrow's news tonight now in our Media Buzz. First front page is Erin. Just Stop Foiled is the headline in the Metro as eco-activists were finally halted by counter-protesters surrounding them with a human chain. I'm going to show you what went down very shortly, so don't go anywhere. The Independent leads with its exclusive investigation into a Berkshire mental health hospital. Scandal hit Taplow Manor has now closed after it was exposed for, quote, treating patients like animals. My superstar panel back with me now. Top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Conservative peer Lord Sean Bailey and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. And breaking tonight, polls now closed in 3 constituencies across England in what is expected to be a triple by-election loss for Rishi Sunak's Conservatives. The crucial vote could set the tone going into next year's election, with new polling showing the Prime Minister's personal popularity rating at its lowest level since he entered number 10, down a whopping 6%. And that's in a month. Tonight, Tory sources told GB News we have to wait for the results to come in, but by-elections are rarely won by governing parties, and they are rarely good indicators of general election performance. Across all of these campaigns, we have heard zero enthusiasm for Sir Keir Starmer's Labour Party and their lack of answers. We now need to redouble our efforts, earning back the trust of voters by delivering on our plan to halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut one-team lists and stop the bows. But Alison, you have written in your column that Rishi is about to discover just how disillusioned Conservative Party members are.
Dear, oh dear. It's not going to be pretty, is it?
It's going to be a bloodbath tonight.
I think it's going to be a bloodbath. Look, I have my own focus group in the Daily Telegraph inbox to my column, and they've been very, very upset for a long time. They feel utterly betrayed. Tory voters of 30 years standing, actual members, are furious, Dan, and they are seeing an unconservative, conservative government. They're seeing record highest taxes for 70 years, no meaningful attempt to reform the NHS, back of the fag packet ideology for net zero, no housing for young people, on and on and on it goes. And I think if you try to win over the people who hate you and you neglect the people who support you, you are in big trouble. So I don't think it's going to be very good news. And there are obviously the Uxbridge constituency, which was Boris's constituency. That's quite a small majority, 7,000. But you would absolutely expect a Conservative Party that was on track to win a general election or to do OK in a general election to win Somerset and Frome and Selby and Ainslie. And if they go, they are both over 20,000 majorities. So we are looking now at a situation where no Tory safe seat may be safe. I think, I could be wrong, you can hold me to this, I'll buy you all drinks. We could be looking at a Liberal Party 1924-style meltdown in 2024. And that was one of the most devastating obliterations of a British political party. And that would mean people like Suella Braverman, lots of the top Tories would be gone. They've got an awful lot of ground to make up. It's going to be bad. But Baron Bailey may not like me being so negative about his party.
Yeah, I mean, that's damning.
Look, you'd be a fool to say that a place like Somerset and Frome growing isn't important. It sends a message that the Prime Minister needs to listen to. But there's three things I'd say. Firstly, actually, the real pain was felt in the local elections. When Labour became the biggest party of local government, that's where the real pain meant, because a lot of good Conservatives lost their seats and they are seething, and we lose them as supporters and activists. The second thing to say is, look, sitting governments never win by-elections, but losing a place like Somerset and Frome would really be quite scary because the majority is huge. When you talk about Uxbridge, the only person who could have kept that seat, they forced to resign. Boris could have kept it.
Yeah. Forced to resign?
And would have kept it. But the thing I would say to the PM is resist any ridiculous calls to get rid of you, hold on to the reins and give us something to support you. And I would say to Rishi this, when John Major was in this position, they absolutely pummeled him and told him he would lose, and he won. But the way in which he won was to forget all this managerial politics. He went back to Conservative beliefs and made the public realise he was going to deliver on that. The problem we have is sometimes we sound like a slightly less Labour version of Labour. It's time to step out as Conservatives. That's the only thing that will save us. A bold Prime Minister who acts like a Conservative is what we need.
Amy Nicole?
No, I'm still quite shocked that you said that Boris left. Boris resigned. He abandoned his constituents. He didn't need to do that. He left that seat wide open.
He had the likes of you chasing him out on a spurious claim.
Not literally.
He didn't leave. He was pushed.
He absolutely did. He left that wide open, and that shows his loyalty to you, to the party.
He would have kept his seat.
To this whole charade. He was complete populist the whole time, and he left as soon as he could. But I actually feel sorry for Rishi Sunak because he kind of inherited Boris's mess in all this.
Oh, so
and I don't think
you signed up to this whole long COVID thing. It's long Boris thing, they call it. Sorry, that is ludicrous. That is ludicrous. This is the Boris derangement syndrome. So he's been out of office now for a year. And when he left office, he was just 3 points behind Keir Starmer. But Alison,
the Boris Johnson brand of
Boris.
politics completely changed the Conservative Party and changed the reputation of the Conservative Party. And I honestly think if it wasn't for the whole Boris Johnson syndrome, which kicked off in, I would say, like that 2019 intake, which completely transformed, brought forward all the Brexiteers.
Boris had more of what Sean is talking about.
Short-termism.
Needing some serious oomph now.
Yeah.
So Boris could, for all his many manifold faults, get out there, galvanise. I mean, all these red wall seats would never have gone to the Conservatives without Boris Johnson. He was a personality, and they thought, God, he's a bit of a character, he's a bit of a chancer, but we'll give him a go. And Rishi Sunak just simply doesn't have that. He's an apparatchik, he's very careful. As Sean says, he needs to be bold now. He needs to throw the entire farm at it.
Rishi Sunak's legacy, at least, will involve some minor achievements. I think Windsor Framework, the LGBT apology for the people in the military this week, the trade deals he's done. He's actually got stuff done, but he never gets any credit because he inherited this absolute mega circus from Boris Johnson, which I think will. He was never going to stay Prime Minister. He knew that when he inherited the government.
More of my readers are cross with Boris having gone than they are pleased with Rishi, I have to say.
My point is this. All elections are fought in unique circumstances. The idea that Labour automatically wins simply isn't true, because Keir Starmer stands for absolutely nothing. You could be a Labour supporter for the last 30 years. Please do tell me what Keir Starmer stands for. Yes, you dislike the Tories, I get that, but what do you like about Keir Starmer?
OK, but at the moment, literally no seats would go to a Tory if there was a by-election in any one seat.
But that always happens.
Not one Tory seat.
This is the tragedy of these three by-elections, is we are facing, we were talking about this earlier, Sean and I, we are facing a third division Labour government.
Yes.
We are not looking forward to a Labour government. It's not like 1997 when Blair and Brown had vision for the country. They came in with a plan and they wanted to make it a better country. What the hell the Labour government is going to do except us take us further down.
But two of these by-elections didn't even need to happen. Nigel Adams flounced off because he couldn't be a Lord. Boris Johnson flounced off because somebody said he broke
come on, you forced him out. Now look, the public, as you just saw,
that's how loyal they are.
The Metro continued their fight back against the Just Stop Oil eco-terrorist today in lieu of any support from the police. Now, one heroic pensioner gave the middle-class medalist a piece of his mind. after another of their tiresome slow walk stunts.
Work for a living, you know what it's like. All my life for the likes of you. Stupid idiots. What planet do you live on? What do you watch in jail? Idiots.
Incredibly, cops moved him on. Meanwhile, a group called Just Stop Peeing Everyone Off, love that, wearing similar bright orange T-shirts, prevented JSO loons from marching in the road by circling them in a counter-protest. Watch.
My name's Pia, I'm 29 years old, and yesterday I was arrested for peacefully protesting on the road. But I'm back out here today because it is our democratic right to do so. And we know that disruption is uncomfortable.
That led people on social media to ask where can they sign up. So maybe the climate clowns will finally get the message. I doubt it, though. Amy Nicole.
They all made friends at the end, though. They made friends, and that is Britain, polite Britain in action.
Didn't show the beautiful moment. Okay. Coming up, England legend Ian Botham slams report into racism in cricket as a waste of time that's destroyed people's lives. So is society's obsession with race starting to do more harm than good? The Superstars panel return to debate that in the next Media Buzz. But first, Dame Andrea Jenkyns has been campaigning in the by-election battleground of Selby this week, but joins me live in just a few moments to give her first reaction to the polls closing. What does tonight mean for the Tories, and is Sunak toast? Dame Andrea here next.
The Live Desk with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Pip Thompson. It's here Monday to Friday on GB News.
From midday, we'll bring you the news as it breaks, whenever it's happening and wherever it's happening, from across the UK and around the world.
Refreshing, feisty, but with a bit of fun too.
If it matters to you, we'll have it covered on TV, radio and online.
Join the Live Desk on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Weeknights on GB News from 6 p.m. You'll always get drama.
Please stop, Michelle. Please stop.
Should I just shut up?
Romance.
You like me, I like you. There you go.
There you are. Well, don't tell anybody.
Adventure.
Etc.
That's the whole point.
And action.
Sergeant read my superstar panel. They're already at it. They're fighting. It's going to be quite a show.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
So Jubes & Co, we tackle the issues of the day with real robust debate, both sides of the fence, battling it out with me in the middle with my forthright opinions and views, and often really interesting things happen because you start with a position and then by the end of the debate you find actually, well, I might not have thought about that one.
What we need in this country is 2 new political parties.
You should maybe think about doing a 2024 calendar. I'm Michelle Dewberry and I'm keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening.
GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's watching.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed. So I guess they've always been quite woke. That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In a world of dull and predictable radio and TV shows.
Oh, hi. On Mark Dolan tonight, we've got big guests. We drill into the big stories of the day. The show adds up to a brilliant listening and viewing experience. Mark Dolan Tonight is the most entertaining current affairs show ever, and that's a fact. That's Mark Dolan Tonight, Friday, Saturday and Sunday from 9. Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Like all families, we have arguments every now and then, but actually we agree on what the mission of GB News is, and that's the most fundamentally important thing.
GB News provides the kind of platform that lets all voices be heard.
We don't hold back. We're free to say what we really think.
Just because some people who live in a tiny little Westminster bubble think that their particular story is important, that's not the most important story for me.
And often there will be difficult stories, stories that you won't find on the establishment media.
Because what people think in the north of England may be very different to what they're thinking in the home counties.
We're going to carry on telling the world what life is really like for households up and down the UK.
We love to be in your car, in your kitchen as you're having your breakfast. Whatever you're doing, you are part of the show. If it matters to you, it matters to us.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Kelvin McKenzie coming up. A time now for Dame Andrea Jenkyns. And just a few minutes ago, at the top of the hour, the polls slammed shut in tonight's three crucial by-elections, including Boris Johnson's former seat of Uxbridge and South Ruislip. And with the Conservative Party facing the very real prospect of three by-election losses in one day, which no government has managed since 1968, there are fears that the results could foreshadow further failure at the next general election as the Tories desperately tried to prevent slippery Starmer strolling through Number 10's front door. So, Dame Andrea, you've been campaigning outside the Westminster bubble ahead of the by-election up in Selby this week. What's your impression of the feeling on the ground, and does it match the doom and gloom being predicted in Westminster?
I mean, I was there from the very first week campaigning, actually, Dan, when we selected a candidate. And, do you know, I'd be very surprised if we hang on to any, given the polling. But it's such a shame because we've got a great candidate in Selby. She's from the neighbouring town. Her father was a miner who became market stall holder. She's a lawyer herself. She's a councillor in Yorkshire as well. And it's such a shame. But I'm finding on the doorstep, to be honest with you, Dan, there's no appetite for Starmer whatsoever. So it's certainly not on 96 like your fabulous panel has just suggested. But it's because I think it will be dire because of the apathy on my side, actually. You know, we haven't got the kind of Conservative policies to really bring people out, such as the low taxes.
Indeed. So, Andrea, do you get angry with the Wets in your party trying to blame this on Boris Johnson? They're describing it as long Boris. When Boris left, he was only a couple of points behind in the polls.
Completely. And let's not forget, it's very hard for the governing party to win by-elections, but look how he won Hartlepool. You know, under him, we won Hartlepool by-election. Yes, we lost Wakefield, unfortunately, etc. afterwards, just before Boris stepped down. But yeah, they've got to stop blaming Boris. Look, the Prime Minister's been in since October, and really his policies should be cutting through now. And if they don't, I really hope that tomorrow morning the Prime Minister, the Cabinet, they sit down and realise that they've got to have a rethink of policies. And just as your panel said, we want Conservative policies. We want to be the party of low taxes, because people on the doorstep, they think, what is the difference between, as you said, slippery Starmer, who is not cutting through on the doorstep, and the Conservatives at the moment?
Now, speaking about Tory Wets, Andrea, Tobias Elwood, who is a former soldier, has been forced to admit he got it wrong after recording a tone-deaf video celebrating the Taliban's progress in tackling corruption in the opium trade in Afghanistan. This was bizarre. Watch.
It may be hard to believe, but security has vastly improved, corruption is down, and the opium trade has all but disappeared.
Well, here in Kabul, the streets are relatively safe. The checkpoints have all gone, businesses are reopening, and the economy is starting to function. Our British embassy is just through those gates over there. Unfortunately, it's still closed.
I mean, Andrea, given, for example, I don't know, the inhumane treatment of women, it's quite bizarre to see Elwood there making almost like a propaganda video for the Taliban.
Absolutely. I mean, I come up with some stupid things sometimes, but I think what Tobias said is just taking the biscuit. But I do wonder the timing of it, actually, Dan, because, look, we've seen that the Defence Secretary has said he's stepping down in the reshuffle. Is this Tobias's video saying, pick me, what's gone badly wrong?
Yeah, true. And a surprise to nobody, by the way, the bitter and twisted European Union sided with Argentina over us by recognising the Falkland Islands by their Argentinian name in a recent declaration. Now, this is despite the islands being officially ours, as we know. You know, we went to war for it, Andrea. The EU did backtrack today, but doesn't it just prove off we're better off out of bitter Brussels?
Completely, Dan. I mean, I fought like tooth and nail for Brexit. And I think, again, the EU, their mask has slipped. You know, we've seen what they're really like. I don't think they've ever forgiven us for Brexit and for leaving the EU. And it shows you their foreign policy really, you know, we was never to the heart of it. And so we're far better out charting our own way in the world. And let's face it, you know, we have fantastic military. And when it comes to Ukraine, look, it's Britain leading the way of support there. So I think we need to be proud of our foreign policy and our defence policy.
Now, Andrea, figures hidden away in the Foreign Office's annual report revealed that British aid to India set to store a whopping 70%. Now, that's despite repeated pledges from ministers to axe it. And given India is wealthy enough to have launched its own space programme, is this a bit of a insult to British taxpayers?
I mean, I think it's just crazy, Dan, to be honest. I mean, for years we've been saying, I mean, quite since, you know, even I've been elected, actually, since 2015, that we're going to stop giving money to these BRIC nations who are, you know, the emerging economies. They are doing fabulously well, and we shouldn't be giving money. Not when, I mean, I've had a surgery today, Dan, and, you know, people are really struggling. And especially with the energy costs, and we shouldn't be sending money abroad in this way.
Sorry, I'm so stupid. Initially, when you said that, I thought, oh, no, you've been in hospital. No, I get you. OK, you've been meeting with your constituents. Good. Got it. Andrea Jenkyns, good luck for the Tories tonight, but I don't think it's looking good for you. We'll speak very soon. But coming up, in Uncancelled, Fleet Street icon Kelvin McKenzie gets stuck into not one but two apologies heading Nigel Farage's way after his banking scandal revelations. A woke former BBC man and bank CEO have been left red-faced tonight, and Kelvin's going to let rip on this very soon. But next, in the media buzz, England legend Ian Botham slams a report into racism in cricket as a waste of time that's destroyed people's lives. So is society's obsession with race doing more harm than good? My superstar panel weigh in next.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A lucky few of us have managed to see some sunny spells throughout today, but there are still a few showers lingering on into the evening and into Friday as well, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland through Scotland as well. Also a few just clearing their way off the far southeast of England as well. In between that, we will start to see some clearer spells developing, and that will allow those temperatures to just slide off into single figures for particularly rural areas, particularly for parts of central Scotland. We could see close to 4 degrees Celsius, so a bit of a chill in the air first thing on Friday morning. That will allow for some sunshine, but there's also going to be the central area from Northern Ireland, southern Scotland down into Northern England, where it is rather cloudy from the word go, and that cloud will continue to push its way across the rest of England and Wales throughout the day. The risk of some scattered showers in there as well. More prolonged rain for parts of Northern Ireland. Underneath all that cloud, though, it is going to be a relatively cool day, temperatures between 16 and 22 degrees Celsius. Into the weekend, something more widely unsettled will be developing as these frontal systems start pushing their way in from the Atlantic. Those isobars also squeezing together across the southern half of the UK, particularly southern coast of England. We'll see some very strong winds, coastal gales, perhaps possible later on Saturday. This accompanied by outbreaks of rain for the vast majority of us. The far north of Scotland getting away with the sunniest and driest start to the weekend, but there'll be further outbreaks of rain and showers as we head into Sunday and the start of next week as well. Bye-bye.
That warm feeling inside. From Boxed Boilers, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Monday to Thursday nights on GB News. At 6, it's Dubes & Co. 7 o'clock, Farage. At 8, join Jacob Rees-Mogg. And at 9, Dan Wootton Tonight, followed by headliners on TV, radio and online. This is GB News.
Now then, Lee Anderson here.
Join me on GB News on my new show, The Real World, every Friday at 7 p.m, where real people get to meet those in power and hold them to account. Every week, we'll be hearing your views from up and down the country in the real world. Join me at 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, on Sunday mornings from 9:30, taking the politicians to task and breaking out of SW1 to see how their decisions are affecting you across the UK. Bursting the Westminster bubble every Sunday morning, only on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain's watching.
Join us every night on GB News at 11 p.m. for Headliners, which is 3 top comedians going through the next day's news stories, which is exactly what you need, because when the establishment has gone crazy, you need some craziness to make sense of it. So join us 11 p.m. every night on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. Every Sunday from 11, join Michael Portillo.
There will be topical discussion, looking at the week before and the week to come. So kick back and relax at 11 a.m. on Sundays on GB News with me, Michael Portillo. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
OK, so let's return to tomorrow's news tonight. Out in the Media Buzz, more front pages are in. And the Daily Mail leads on the apology from Coutts to Nigel Farage, but notes the silence from the BBC, which faces calls for it to address its own reporting that suggested Nigel was simply too skint to have an account with them. The Daily Telegraph also leads on the NatWest apology to Nigel Farage and a new health study that says high cholesterol risks are greater in women. And the Daily Mirror leads with the revelation from new court documents that Prince Andrew visited Jeffrey Epstein while the paedophile was under house arrest for sex offences, contradicting his account during the infamous interview with Emily Maitlis on Newsnight. Now, a bombshell report into English cricket declaring that widespread and deep-rooted racism was endemic throughout the game was published last month, with one race row at Yorkshire County Cricket Club leading to a series of public mudslinging between top players. But one of cricket's biggest names has now sensationally hit back. So listen to what former cricket commentator and member of the House of Lords, Sir Ian Botham, thinks of the controversial report, and he's certainly not mincing his words.
Read bits of it, to be honest, I threw it down the floor in the end. To my eyes, it's a nonsense.
Right.
And a complete and utter waste of money that could have been well spent doing other things, stuff that's gone on at Yorkshire. I just hope that we don't end up with someone with blood on their hands, because those guys, a couple of them I know, I'm not going to name them, but a couple of them I know whose lives have almost been totally destroyed.
Yeah.
And through it, and they don't know what they're meant to have done.
Yep, absolutely. I hear it. My superstar panel return now. Top Daily Telegraph columnist Alison Pearson, Conservative peer Lord Sean Bailey, and the author and broadcaster Amy Nicole Turner. Alison Pearson, I actually think Ian Botham is totally spot on here. Do you?
Yeah, I'm so glad he's spoken out because I think people are very frightened to speak out. Now, this report he was alluding to was called the Independent Commission for Equity in Cricket. Now, anybody who knows anything about this field knows that the word equity is a huge red flag. That means it's written by people who are obsessed with race in our society. And that, I would say that commission went looking for evidence of racism. Many people I know who both play cricket, organise cricket for kids, take part in cricket. I've spoken to them over the last few weeks since the report came out. They're devastated, Dan. An Indian, a friend who's Indian, he is absolutely devastated. He looks to cricket as a unifying force in our society. Ian Botham is part of a great generation of cricket. His big mate is Sir Viv Richards. It was Sachin Tendulkar. Cricket in this country has been a solvent of racial tensions. So I think this report was dreadful. And Ian Botham said, yes, of course, there have been isolated incidents, but he hadn't come across it. And I think it's cast a lot of good people in a bad light, including Michael Vaughan, who was accused of making racist remarks and was cleared.
You absolutely can't say that these are just isolated incidents, though, because the findings of that IECE report found that 50% of players in the last 5 years had experienced some form of racism. And within the Pakistani community, it was 87%. There are major cricketers who will talk about this. Moeed Ali, Imran Khan. Cricket has had a problem with racism for about 40 years. It has got better. It has got better, but it is still endemic in the sport, and that's what the report suggested. And if you start to say, oh, that report, to bring its reputation into disrepute, well, are we going to say that about the Cass report? Are we going to say that about the Casey review? This was...
It's not fair. It's not fair to compare it to other reports that bear no resemblance to it at all. The Casey review is a different thing. Let's be clear. As someone who was born and raised in this country and played cricket in school, cricket was a great leveller. I remember someone saying... Hold on. I made someone saying to me the idea that white people are superior to black people when we pummel them all the time on a cricket field is that was the beginning of the conversation. And I want to be very clear about this, and this is about the report, yeah? A racist team or a set of racist goings-on does not make for a racist sport. That's a very different thing. To be clear, there is some racism in cricket. That's people. There is some. But if you're going to build a report that only focuses on the racism and doesn't focus on A, the progress that has been made, and B, how to go about the next set of progress, all you do is generate animosity. And if you get a set of people who are only looking for the problem, they will only find the problem. So when you commission this report, part of it, the leading part of it should be, OK, we know there's racism, that's not a revelation, how do we put it right? And I worry that it was more about punishing people, elevating racism, rather than finding a solution.
Amy wants to respond to that. I do actually have some agreement with you there, because the real barrier in cricket remains class. If you go to private school, you are 13 times more likely to succeed as a professional cricketer, despite only 5% of the population going to private school.
That's because soccer is predominantly the sport state schools.
But that's...
But
are you comfortable with that?
Yeah, no, but Amy,
hold on. My son is an amazing cricketer, and I want him to have equality of chance.
That's a decision that state schools have made. And also, as much as I love cricket, you cannot deny that football is more popular. So if you looked at it the other way around, if you go to a state school, you're far more likely to get involved in a more popular sport that has much more money in it.
But the class
this is the point I'm trying to make. It is what you are looking for. It is what you're looking for.
No, it's not. They completely intersect. And the class disparity, obviously, is reflective of why it is overwhelmingly ethnic minorities who get affected by this, because they're proportionally overrepresented within that.
The report was very dim about certain things. So it said, like, girls and Asian players are unrepresented beyond this certain point.
Based on the participation levels.
That is because lots of Asian parents say to the boys and girls, you're going to get on with your studies and be a doctor or a lawyer, and that is absolutely true. They drop out because they think professional sport is not a respectable thing for an immigrant child to do. So there are lots of things in the report which didn't actually burrow down into things like that.
And Ian Botham's point, I think, about the impact that this report has had on certain individuals' lives, and worried about there being blood on the hands of the people behind it. I think we should really listen to that. Now, friend of the show, Deputy Tory Party Chairman Lee Anderson, he seems unable to avoid Steve Bray as the Westminster whiner chased Lee down the street before the pair clashed once again outside Parliament. And as usual, There was only one winner.
Had a bath this morning? I have, every morning. Every morning.
Special brew?
Yeah.
You get a job anyway.
I'm self-employed, I keep telling you that.
You're unemployed.
But you're too fit to listen.
Too thick.
Yeah.
Too thick.
Too fit to listen. You sponge off society.
Anyway.
What's this about your second job with GBNews? I won't take a second job.
Here you go, I'll take a first job.
100,000.
Oh, what a great comeback. The Red Bull Rottweiler certainly hasn't lost his bite. Amy Nicole, Sean Bailey, Alison Pearson.
You forgot the Turner.
Oh.
He's not going to be happy.
Is that like some sort of woke offence? Have I like...
No, just my husband. My husband's watching and he'll be very upset.
Misnamed you?
It's for Jonathan.
Sorry, Amy Nicole Turner.
Thank you.
You're going to have to give me a little while. Do stand by, because coming up, find out which woke newspaper has been nominated in tonight's Greatest Britain Union Jackass for their ageist and sexist reporting. But next, in uncancelled Fleet Street legend Kelvin McKenzie gives his unfiltered verdict on the Nigel Farage banking scandal that's left the wokesters red-faced and shamed. Kelvin actually thinks this is one of the greatest ever victories over the establishment. He also gets stuck into this Falklands row and a vile thug who killed a pregnant mum of 3 by speeding at more than 120 miles per hour in his car. All of that when we're live with Kelvin McKenzie in just 2 minutes' time.
What you get for breakfast is something that, if we do our jobs right, you will wake up to news that you didn't know the night before.
It's a conversation. It's not just me and Eamon.
We want to get to know you, and we want you to get to know us.
From 6, it's Breakfast with Eamon and Isabel.
Monday to Thursdays on GB News.
Britain's news channel.
When the news happens, it happens here.
And really important breaking news.
Breaking news this morning.
On TV, radio and online, the news starts here on Britain's Newsroom.
All the biggest stories and the answers that you need from across the UK and beyond.
Join Britain's Newsroom from 9:30 on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christie's Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster is going around in ever-decreasing circles, followed by the media. Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it? Join me at 7 p.m, Mondays to Thursdays on Farage, here on GB News. We will have open, rational debate. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this. Join us here on GB News, the People's Channel. Britain is watching.
People in Britain, they love free speech, but they also love fair play.
I don't care if I'm speaking somebody from a trade union, from the Labour Party, somebody from the SNP. And I think the viewers like to see that actually we can challenge one another, but in a positive way.
We think we ask the questions that people want to ask, and often we ask the questions that we wanted to ask in Parliament but never got the chance to ask.
So join us every Saturday, 10 a.m. till noon on GB News,
Britain's news channel.
Time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. And Nigel Farage's banking scandal has exposed more than just creeping authoritarianism. It's also laid bare the bitter bias of left-wing hacks like former BBC bod John Sobel, who smugly declared last week, "You must feel a bit of a Charlie if you're Nigel Farage and you claim that it's an establishment stitch-up, that your account's been closed, and not just because you're not rich enough for Coutts." After Nigel's damning revelations yesterday proving Coutts did close his accounts for holding the wrong views, Farage fired back, "Hi, John. Who is the Charlie now? I look forward to your apology." And to his credit, Sobel did oblige today, tweeting, "I got it wrong, sorry. That will teach me to trust reporting of my old employer." And Kelvin McKenzie, that is really interesting, isn't it? Because the BBC got this so spectacularly wrong. Surely they're the ones that should be apologising for their reporting. I wondered, Kelvin, if we needed to set BBC Verify, you know, that the misinformation unit needs to start looking into this one.
Very good idea. And the other person that's gone very quiet
is Mr. Jack, the reporter, who claimed that the reason that Nigel got the push was because he didn't have enough money in the bank account, right? And that turned out to be complete cobblers. And he almost certainly, according to the Telegraph, got it because he was sitting next to Dame Alison Rose, the CEO of the NatWest Bank, the parent company of Coutts, at a BBC correspondence dinner the night before he revealed this, quote, exclusive, unquote. He hasn't said a word today. They got it wrong. Not only have they got it wrong, they've actually, the source has now had to completely backtrack in order to get herself off the hook. What Nigel Farage has done has been a phenomenal victory, the size of which, against an establishment the size of a bank, right? And you are a customer, you have been wronged. What can you do about it? Do a Nigel. Learn from Nigel. Take publicity. Take everything you've got and throw it at them. So the next thing I am fantastically looking forward to is Dame Alison Rose being pushed out of her job. Because the idea that the CEO of Coutts can wake up one day and say, I must throw old Nigel out, I've never liked his politics anyway, and did it on his own account and didn't call upstairs to say to the CEO, look, I want to do this. What do you think, Alison? And Rose says, I tell you what, go for your life. It's an incredible situation. And what they don't like, the banks, of course, is that all the politicians have piled in, with the exception of one party. Have you heard Starmer? Have you heard Reeve? Have you heard them all coming out saying, well done, Nigel. Thank you for standing up for every account holder who doesn't have politics that agree with, quotes, your bank. My advice to NatWest customers who voted leave is, my advice is you should try and head to Barclays, HSBC, go somewhere else, because clearly you're unwanted within that corporation. It's an absolute disgrace, and I can't congratulate Farage enough. It's an astonishing volte-face, and were it not for his strength of purpose, and in a funny way, were it not for him being on GB News, he would never have the platform to win what is a fantastic victory, not only for himself, but for other ordinary people.
No, indeed, it's incredible, absolutely incredible, and so important because so many of us stayed quiet in the past about being debanked because we were embarrassed, we were worried about the consequences, and I think Nigel has now proven actually the importance of us all speaking out about this stuff. And now, Kelvin, the EU sparked a diplomatic row by endorsing the Argentine name for the Falkland Islands. So you were the editor of The Sun during the Falklands War. You put out the famous gotcha front page, there it is, back in 1982.
I've worn well.
So does this prove why it's so good that we're just out of the EU? Now, what were they thinking with this, Kelvin?
I'll tell you what they were thinking. This is good politics. The UK can just get on with it. They can suck it up. We don't really care. We can do this deal with these South American countries. It helps the Argentinas. It might help something out. Actually, the truth about the matter is the Falkland Islands love being under the UK control. They could have voted at any time to join Argentina. They got nothing in common with them. And actually, we fought to maintain that position. A situation we would do if Gibraltar, who doesn't also want to be part of a Spanish mainland, right? Supposing they say, as they do, we want to stay. Actually, we would fight for Gibraltar if they wanted us to do so. It's a fantastic thing. It is our country. It's one of the things that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. You can't just have people just deciding from other areas to take over land. So war turns out to be the only answer. We won that war. It was a fantastic performance. I mean, it's a 6,000-mile supply line, my God, and we still did it. And we lost 235 lives to see those people live under the British rule, because that's what they want. The EU don't understand this. They don't understand frontiers. They don't understand anything. And that's one of the reasons why we left.
Now, Kelvin, this is the moment. A scumbag driver who filmed himself speeding at 123 miles per hour with one hand on the wheel before he smashed into a 38-year-old pregnant mum of 3.
So it's Abdul Iqbal. He was jailed for 12 years after the killing of former Hollyoaks actress Frankie Jules Hobb. But given his recklessness, Kelvin, was that sentence long enough?
Well, absolutely it wasn't, man. This is a heartbreaking story. This is a real piece of filth. Well, it was his father's car. I don't think he had work. He was going to upload that picture, according to the police, probably to Facebook, in order to boast about it. This woman, her car had broken down. He crashes, he's swerving all over the road. He crashes into her car. He kills her. She's pregnant, right? Her son, who was also in the car, he also ends up in a coma. The family have been destroyed. And what happens? Actually, that guy gets 12 years. He'll be out in less than 6. He won't even be 28 years old. And yet his life goes on. The husband, the father, his life will never be the same. His wife is dead. Everything he's fought for. What is going on with our law? We should, as far as I understand it, the maximum that guy could have got was 14 years. We need to look at these sentences. On my Twitter feed, the one thing that gets everybody absolutely enraged is the sense that people aren't having big enough sentences for crimes which make you feel terrible inside and terrible for the family. That father, what life does he face going forward?
No, very good point. Very well put. Kelvin McKenzie, former editor of the Sun newspaper. Thank you so much. Kelvin will speak on Monday. But it's time now to reveal tonight's greatest Britain in Uni and Jackass. My superstar panel return. Alison Pearson, who's your nominee for tonight's GB?
It is Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, who said that it was sinister, the role that equity, diversity and inclusion had played in Coutts Bank's banning of or closing of Nigel Farage's account. Suella, reliably the most, if not the only, Conservative left in our Conservative government.
Yeah, certainly around that cabinet table anyway. Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominees is GB News' very own Nigel Farage for, as Kelvin McKenzie said, doing a Nigel, taking on the bank and beating them. This is a victory for all ordinary people in this country, because if you think it's only Nigel that's been had this done to, you're wrong, you're next. We need someone to take these people on.
And Amy Nicol, your nominee.
Well, I don't think there were any decent humans this week, so I went with a cat. The cat's name is Zebby. He's from Derbyshire. He's Cats Protection Cat of the Year because he is a support cat for his deaf owner. He's incredible. No special training, yet can hear and let her know if the phone rings or the doorbell or the postman. This is a cat with superpowers. So, Zebby for me.
Incredible choice. But look, I've got to go with Nigel Farage after that incredible victory over the establishment after he took on.
What about
Dirk? I know, I'm sorry. Usually I'd do it for the cats. It's been a big day for us here. Alison Pearson, your Uni and Jackass nominee.
It has to be Dame Alison Rose for bringing the good name of Alison's into disrepute and for her shockingly bad, unapologetic letter to Nigel Farage explaining that the bank hadn't, in fact, discriminated against him on the basis of its views, which Coutts jolly well had. Dame Alison, resign or be sacked.
Sean Bailey, your nominee.
My nominee is Coutts Bank for its sinister and careless way that it removed someone's bank account, Nigel Farage's bank account, for political reasons and denied that that was the case. The 40-page dodgy dossier shows that it was. Remember, this is a bank, well, its parent bank at least, that's full of our public money. This is sinister and mustn't be allowed to stand because cancelling people is a danger to us all.
And Amy Nicol, your nominee.
So I picked the Evening Standard. Now, I do not share the politics of Susan Hall, but this newspaper has proper stitched her up this week, and it wound me up so much. Women face a really tough time in politics, and she trusted that photographer, and they picked that photo, which the commentary of has just been ageist, misogynistic. It's just been such an ugly reaction, and she does not deserve it, despite me having no political alignment with her whatsoever.
So many people posting this picture and saying, oh, congratulations to Sadiq Khan on winning a third term. I'm sorry. Actually, once you get to know Susan Hall, who is a brilliant woman with brilliant Conservative policies,
with a huge passion for London, you're going to be mistaken. And actually, Sean Bailey, you were, of course, the former Tory candidate for the London mayoralty. And a very similar thing happened with you, didn't it? You were written off because everyone said Khan would be impossible to beat. And actually, you got so close that if only people had supported you from the start, you might have had a chance of booting that numbskull out of office.
Susan is a tough cookie, and this photographer and Even Standard took advantage of her. She didn't want to take the picture, and she did to help them, and they took hundreds of pictures and they posted this one deliberately to make her look bad. And for women in public life, this is terrifying. This is why women wouldn't enter public life. And I think the Standard should actually apologise.
And Susan, if you're watching this, get copy approval on the photos. First rule of photo shoots.
I don't think politicians are allowed that. Alison, do you agree it was a bit of a stitch-up?
Just horrible. I think she's a really nice, sound woman, and I agree that she's passionate about London, and I wish her the best.
But look, I'm actually going to go with Alison, though. I'm going to go with Alison for the win because it's got to be Dame Alison Rose for that ridiculous decision, and then seemingly, we don't know for sure, but seemingly briefing the BBC a bit of a porcupine about it. Alison Pearson, Sean Bailey, Amy Nicole, my superstar panel, thank you so much for your company. Amy Nicole Turner, sorry. Lord Sean Bailey, it's all changed. I'm back Monday from 9 p.m. Next up, it's Headliners. Have a great weekend. Good night.
The temperature's rising. Boxed Solar, proud sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Jonathan Vautry, here with your latest GB News weather forecast provided by the Met Office. A lucky few of us have managed to see some sunny spells throughout today, but there are still a few showers lingering on into the evening and into Friday as well, particularly for parts of Northern Ireland, through Scotland as well, also a few just